Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you, Secretary Chao, for being here this afternoon with us. And I especially want to thank you for coming to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and to all the places that you visited that had been affected by the 2017 hurricane season. There's been much discussion in this hearing about, in particular, the $50 billion rural infrastructure program. And one of the questions that I have relates to, in that program, it states that portion of the rural infrastructure program funds will be set aside for tribal infrastructure and territorial infrastructure, with the remainder available to the states. Now, the U.S. territories have been subjected to substantial infrastructure funding cuts over the last 25 years, while the 50 states and the District of Columbia have received increases. These cuts have resulted in deterioration of our public highway system, enormous damage to our ports. I know that you've been a frequent visitor to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I know that our governor and others have spoken with you about that issue. How much of the $50 billion in rural infrastructure program funding does the administration expect to set aside for territorial infrastructure, and how might that set aside for territorial infrastructure be apportioned among the territories?
That's a very good question. I don't know. And I certainly think that your concerns are very reasonable. And so we have worked on other things in the past, especially in the aftermath of the hurricanes. So we look forward to working with you on that as well.
I'd appreciate that, because as you know, and you may have seen, and others in your agency have also seen, that much of the damage that we sustain, particularly with our roadways that are right abutting the waterways, that there was a substantial deterioration occurred because we did not have funding over a protracted period of time to support our highway system. And that increase would really be important to us. We've experienced enormous decreases over the years, along with the other territories, Guam, Northern Marianas, and Puerto Rico as well. Do you know how rural is going to be defined for purposes of the Rural Transportation Infrastructure Program? Will it be based on lane miles, or will it be based on population?
I think that's a very good question as well. There's a certain definition to that, and I've been asked this, and I have forgotten it. So
Thank you. And will your
you
agency be the primary lead in administering that, or will agriculture or others? How will that be determined? Who will determine how that funding is distributed?
As of now, it's primarily agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunate. Good for me, I sit on agriculture as well, so I'll tag team you guys on that one. But you know, as we talk about these things, the last thing I wanted to talk with you about was resiliency. Does the White House infrastructure plan include considerations, particularly for states and other areas, to have found that the federal investment on hazard mitigation has a 6-to-1 return on investment? So working on resiliency is really important for the fiscal responsibility of this nation. Are there opportunities for new funding for new infrastructure to incentivize areas in resiliency?
You make a very good point. As of now, I think, if anything, there is a bias toward building new structures rather than maintenance.
And in that resiliency, one of the things, as well as this federal program that you were discussing, much of it is to incentivize local and municipal areas. I know that the chairman has says that in Pennsylvania, they've expended all of their resources at the state level and the local level to do the matching that's necessary for the federal government. In the Virgin Islands, as well as in Puerto Rico, I know that we are already at deficit budgets, and so it will be really difficult for us to provide that match. As well as, are there mechanisms in your thought and the thought of the administration or the president, and how we can add additional incentives to bring private investment to create public-private partnerships?
Well, U.S. Virgin Islands is part of the rural parts. It would be eligible for the rural title, and you will be, the Virgin Islands will be part of that, and 40%, 40 billion of that will be formula, 10 billion will be competitive. We're currently doing the formula on a lane mile basis, which obviously some people don't agree with. So we will look forward to working with Congress as you rewrite this bill or whatever on addressing these issues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlelady, and